Hello, I am Lakshman Maaheshwary, and today we are going to talk about new economic policy. Before we talk about new economic policy or NEP, let us talk about new industrial policy. It included abolition of licensing. Most industries have been freed from licensing and other restrictions. Freedom to import technology. Foreign technological collaborations has been allowed, and contraction of public sector. The government is not expanding unprofitable industrial units in the public sector. Also, there is disinvestment and privatization. Moreover, there is an increase in the importance of small industries. Further, MRTP restrictions have been removed. Companies do not need to seek government permission to issue shares, extend their areas of operation, and establish a new unit. Let us talk about foreign investment in India. In 1991, 51% of foreign investment in 34 high priority industries was allowed without seeking government permission. Non resident Indians were allowed to invest 100% in the export houses, hospitals, hotels, etc. Foreign Investment Promotion Board was established with a view to speedily clear foreign investment proposals. Restrictions, which were before 1991 in operation to regulate dividends repatriation by the foreign investors, have been removed. FERA restrictions have been removed and they have been replaced by FEMA, which is Foreign Exchange Management Act. This has made transactions much simpler now. Now let us have a look at new trade policy. This is a policy through which the foreign trade is controlled and regulated. The economy has been freed from unnecessary controls. There is also reduction in restrictions of export and import. There has also been a reduction in export-import tax. It has been either completely abolished or reduced to the minimum level. There are now easier procedures of export-import. Also, there has been an establishment of foreign capital market. With this, sale and purchase of foreign currency is possible in the open market. India now has full convertibility on current account. In 1994-95, full convertibility became applicable on current account. Transactions with the foreign countries are placed in two categories. Transaction with current account, for example export import, and capital account transactions like investment. As I said earlier, India now has full convertibility. There is unrestricted sale and purchase of foreign exchange in the foreign exchange market for the purpose of payments and receipts on the items connected with current account. Under new economic policy, there is also reduced reservation for public sector. Out of the 17 industries reserved for the public sector under the 1956 industrial policy, the new policy de-reserved 9 industries and thus limited the scope of public sectors to only 8 industries. In the recent times, a few more industries have been de-reserved. Talking about the current standing, now the exclusive area of the public sector remains confined to only two industrial sectors. They are atomic energy and railways. In the new economic policies, there are also efforts to revive loss-making enterprises. Those public sector enterprises which are chronically sick and making persistent losses would be returned to the Board of Industrial and Financial Reconstruction or any other similar high-level institution created for this purpose. The Niti Aayog, tasked with preparing a roadmap for ailing PSUs, has submitted two separate lists of sick and loss-making PSUs. One comprising those that can be closed down and the other of those where government can divest its stake. Let us talk about the current plan. Out of 74, the Ayog has suggested status quo in case of 2 PSUs, a strategic disinvestment of 10, plan for revival with option for strategic disinvestment for 22, share of ownership of 6, merger of 3, long term lease of 5, and closure of 26. Some of the companies under closure are HPCL Biofuels, British India Corporation, Algan Mills, HMT, Central Inland Water Transport Corporation. NEP has export orientation. There are plans for providing incentive for export. Also, export oriented units or EOUs were created. This idea was introduced in early 1981 and is complementary to the SEZ scheme or the erstwhile EPZ or Export Promotion Zone scheme. Here you can see the website for Export Promotion Council for EOUs and SEZs. The new economic policy also ushered in some fiscal reforms. This is the policy of the government connected with income and expenditure. In 1990-91, the fiscal deficit was 8% of the GDP. A fiscal deficit means that the country is spending more than its income. Presently, the Government of India is making efforts to take it to 4% or less. To this goal, basic changes were made in the tax system. The rate of the individual and corporate tax has been reduced in order to bring more people in the tax net. The tax procedures have been simplified and heavy reduction in the import duties has been implemented. There have also been some monetary reforms. It is the control policy through which the central bank controls the supply of money with a view to achieving the objectives of the general economic policy. To this extent, statutory liquidity ratio or SLR has been lowered. Also, the banks have the freedom to decide the rate of interest on the amount deposited. New standards have been laid down for the income recognition for the banks. Permission to collect money by issuing shares in the capital market has been granted to the nationalized banks. Permission to open banks in the private sector has also been granted. Let us now talk about the capital market reforms. It is the market in which securities are sold and bought, and it is the pivot of the economy of a country. Under the Portfolio Investment Scheme, the limit for investment by the NRIs and foreign companies in the shares and debentures of the Indian companies has been raised. Portfolio Investment Scheme means investing in securities. Also, Securities and Exchange Board of India or SEBI was established on April 12, 1988. The companies are free to determine the price of their shares now. The office of the Controller of Capital Issue has been removed. Private sector has been permitted to establish mutual funds. The registration of the sub-broker has been made mandatory. Now let us come to a very important part of new economic policy, that is phasing out subsidies. Cash compensatory support CCS, which was earlier given as export subsidy, has been stopped. CCS has been reduced in case of fertilizers and petro products. Instead, we are now focused on import substitution. First, let us understand CCS. If an exporter wants to import some raw material which is available abroad for 100 rupees, but the same material is available in India for 120 rupees, and the government wants the raw material to be purchased by the exporter from India itself for the protection of indigenous industries, the government is ready to pay the difference of rupees 20 to the exporter in form of subsidy. This payment of rupees 20 will be considered as CCS. The government has also dismantled price control. It has removed Price control in case of many products. Efforts to remove price control were mostly in respect of fertilizers, steel and iron, and petro products. The restriction on the import of these products have also been removed. A National Renewal Fund was established in 1992 which acts as a social safety net to the laborer. There are two schemes under it, one voluntary retirement scheme and the other retraining scheme for rationalized workers in organized sectors. It was established to provide relief to the workers affected by technological changes, privatization of public sector units, and closure of public sector units. Those who lost their jobs would be either paid money under VRS scheme or will be retrained or rehabilitated. However, the fund did not adequately serve the stated objective and was no more than a golden handshake scheme. Hence, it was abolished in the year 2000. Let us try and sum up the new economic policy by comparing the pre-reform era and post-reform era. In the pre-reform era, there was import substitution industrialization. In post-reform era, it was export-led industrialization. There were controls in the form of licenses, permits and quotas, etc. In the current times, there has been a removal of controls which has led to delicensing and debureaucratization which is liberalization. Earlier, there was state-sponsored development which meant a strong public sector. Now, we have market-driven development or privatization which is due to disinvestment. Earlier we had a closed economy, now we have an open economy or we are open to globalization. In the previous times, there was restriction of FDI. Now, India welcomes the entry of MNCs. Earlier, there were controls on interest rates. However, in the present times, there is deregulation of interest rates and also entry of private banks. Now India has capital account convertibility. In the previous times, there was a complex tax structure and multiple indirect taxes. In the present times, there has been a simplification in taxes and laws. But let me tell you, the picture is not all good. There have been some serious shortcomings of reforms. It is argued that these reforms have led to jobless growth. Also, there is growing inequalities in our society. The reforms neglected education and healthcare sector. It is also worth talking about Narasimham Committee on banking sector reforms. Two expert committees were set up under the chairmanship of M. Narasimham. They were called the Narasimham Committee 1, which was set up in 1991, and Narasimham Committee 2, which was set up in 1998. They helped unleash the potential of banking in India. They also minimized the impact of global financial crisis starting in the year 2007. Indian banks survived the 2008 financial crisis relatively unscathed. Let us have a look at the recommendations of Narasimham Committee. He advocated for autonomy in banking, reform in the role of RBI, stronger banking system, zero non-performing assets, capital adequacy and tightening of provisioning norms, and entry of foreign banks. This video was about the new economic policy and brought to you by Lakshman Maaheshwary. Please like, subscribe and share to keep receiving important updates. Have a good day.